get going. Hello, my name is Gareth. You're watching the Hub Online Network. We have a special live event for you all today. We have MP Brad Vis in the house. Let's let Brad say hi.
Hi, everyone. Gareth, thanks for having me back on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here. So let's start off really big. You are part of the inner circle as an MP. Is COVID a hoax?
COVID is absolutely not a hoax.
Okay, well that sets it for the record there, everybody. COVID is not a hoax. Now that's the only sort of joke question I had. So we'll actually start with the real thing here.
You know what? Let's talk about COVID for a second. I got a special mask here that I bought on the Legion.ca website.
Oh, cool.
During COVID-19, our legions across our riding here in Ashcroft, too, many of them suffered a lot because and are anticipating huge revenue losses this year with the Poppy Fund. In many communities that I represent, the Air Cadets or Army Cadets are the ones responsible for. We're good on sound? We're good? Test, yeah. Are responsible for collecting funds for our veterans. And this year, due to some of the COVID-19 restrictions, that's not taking place. So I would encourage everyone, if you enjoy the Legion, support what they do, consider purchasing a membership. I just purchased a membership at the Legion in Mission across from my office, but I also bought some merchandise online. And I'm actually sending out a mailer to the whole riding, just encouraging them to really think about some of our senior veterans this year who need our support and respect, especially during COVID-19.
Awesome.
So yeah, support the Legion, buy a Legion mask.
I suppose that might be taking over instead of buying a Poppy this year.
They're pushing it hard, and you will still be able to buy a Poppy. And in some communities, I'm not sure if it's going to be here in Ashcroft, you're going to be able to do it by tap with your credit card or debit to make a donation for the Poppy Fund this year. But the person-to-person type exchanges that we've seen in years past will not be taking place, according to what the national headquarters of the Legion have shared with me. But so we'll be a little different, but you still will be able to get your Poppy, but it just won't be as present as it usually is in certain communities.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
So let's continue on with COVID just for a little bit here.
Yeah.
So on the grander stage, so you go to on Ottawa quite often. I watch you.
Not as much as I haven't gone very much. I do most of my parliamentary work from my office in Mission or my basement at my house.
Oh, really?
Yes.
But what's the general feeling these days?
Well, there is, yeah. I would say that there's on my side of the house, the opposition side, which is composed of the NDP, the Bloc Québécois, and of course the official opposition, the Conservatives. There is a general concern about ethics in the government. We had prorogation this summer, and I was on the Human Resources Committee, and we were doing good work outlining some of the struggles that non-for-profits, that employers were facing in respect to labor market challenges, and the Liberals shut all that work down. And they said they needed to do that because they needed to prepare for the speech from the throne. Now, there's been broad consensus since the speech from the throne that it was a rehash of basically every promise the Liberals have made over the last 5 years, in addition to ones going back over 30 years with pharmacare. And many people, not just in my party, but the major newspapers in Canada have all questioned, was it really worth shutting down Parliament to give them a reset when they didn't actually take a reset? Just last week on the Human Resources Committee, we had our first meeting post-prorogation, and the government moved a motion, unfortunately with the support of the New Democrats, that we would adopt all of the work and studies and stuff that we had done before and just continue as business as usual. And I was on there, and it's going to be on the parliamentary record soon on Hansard. And I said, well, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers of Canada to look at all of the new programs that were just announced and approved by Parliament in C4. We're talking about extended supports for businesses, rent relief. We're talking about the new Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, the caregiver benefit. Yes, I am looking down at my notes because there's a lot of different programs. The new EI program and the Canada Recovery Benefit. And as parliamentarians, these programs are costing in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And Parliament needs to be scrutinizing how this money is being spent, how responsive the programs are. And the Liberals didn't want to do that work. They said, well, we want to do a broader study on housing. And I'm like, now is not the time for studying. Now is the time in Parliament to pay attention to where the money's going and to provide feedback and thoughtful scrutiny in a reasonable way to ensure that taxpayers and Canadians are not only getting the help that they deserve, but they're getting programs that meet their immediate needs. We're in a pandemic, we're in an emergency situation, no one's questioning that. But our parliamentary work needs to be guided by those principles and not by the Liberal government trying to avoid accountability on the WE scandal, their poor performance as it relates to our relationship with China and all of the other stuff that has permeated the airwaves recently. Sorry for the long-winded answer there.
Oh, no, you talk as much as you feel you need to talk for.
So going back to your original question, I would say then, I feel extremely motivated. I'm going back to Ottawa next week, actually. We're going for normally in October, I would be there for 3 weeks out of 4. Due to the hybrid model that we're operating on, I do Parliament by my basement for 2 of those weeks. And then I'm spending 1 week in Ottawa, and I was there for 1 week in September as well. And when I'm in there, I will be pushing in my committee work in the House of Commons for policies that really meet the needs, the immediate needs of our business owners and of our seniors and everyone else who's lost their job and are really struggling to get by, and to provide that financial accountability that people expect from me and other parliamentarians. So there's a level of anxiety right now. Ottawa was actually they went back to lockdown because the number of cases were so high. Abbotsford, where I lived, has some of the highest rates in the province, and the numbers aren't going down there. So we're not through this yet, but I'm hopeful that things the number of cases will be reduced in the coming months.
Just really quick.
Yeah.
To Taylor Larry, thank you for watching. This person is saying woot woot and action. So
thank you.
Those are the current comments that we have.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned prorogation.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the Liberal government could have still made their throne speech if everything was moving forward as normal?
I think the Liberal government we agreed in the spring to have sittings over the summer because of the important work we were doing. The Liberals stopped that work, and they said they needed to do it for prorogation. But in prorogation, what I was expecting to see in prorogation, I was expecting them to develop a plan, maybe get rapid testing going in Canada. They didn't do any of that. Like I said, they rehashed every promise they've ever made in a throne speech. They cannot feasibly do everything they said they were going to do if you look at their success in the House of Commons in passing bills into law. And it was really irresponsible. We were expecting a unique throne speech that would address the problems Canadians are facing, and they ultimately failed on that. And that's why you've seen us, especially in the House of Commons, pushing hard on rapid testing. Because for our economy to function properly right now, for kids not to be kept home from school, we need the Government of Canada, we need Health Canada to move forward on testing protocols similar to what exists in other G7, G20 nations that seem to be ahead of us in their response to COVID-19.
Before prorogation, the word on the street was that there was the possibility of a vote of no confidence.
Yeah.
And then after, it sort of never materialized. If that were to have been an actual vote, do you think that you might have voted for a vote of no confidence, or?
Well, generally, I am not obviously as in the official opposition. I think first and foremost, right now, though, we are in a very unique period of time. Our focus needs to be on getting Canadians the help they need. And my personal thought was that although I want to see the Liberal government defeated because I believe my party can do a better job, my first and foremost, my responsibility is to make sure that businesses are getting the support they need and individuals are getting the support they need. And so we voted in favor of the new benefits that were passed in September. I was in the House of Commons for that because as the government in waiting, our first and foremost responsibility is to help people. It's not to play electoral politics, and that's why we made the decision we did in September to vote for the new benefits and to quell any criticisms from the Liberal government that the Conservatives aren't really there to help people, and because that's what they keep on saying, and it's completely untrue.
So I'm gonna.
Right now, I'll tell you, I don't really have much confidence in the Liberal government, and I'm pushing extremely hard to get answers. And actually, over the summer, I prepared for an election. I'm ready to go if an election's called tomorrow. I didn't want to do that.
Right.
I didn't want to have to spend my time preparing for an election. I wanted to be preparing. I wanted to be continuing my work in my office to help the people that need it the most right now.
Well, so it's interesting that you say that because, like, of course, in BC here, we are in our own little provincial election.
Yeah.
And as in the job that I have, I was looking at, because they called the snap election at the end of September,
Yeah.
and I was like, the feds are going to go too.
Yeah.
Right? And I was gearing up to do all sorts of like videos, interviews, debates.
I had everything lined up as well. I thought we were going into an election. So
what was the one thing that we talked about around the office here is what was because the NDP sort of eventually said yes to the Liberals and we're going to sort of follow what you say. Mm-hmm. But what was the price to get the NDP on the Liberals' side?
The price was the new Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit. So for those who must quarantine and take time off work and have their hours reduced by 50%, there is a new benefit available. But what was unfortunate in that, because the NDP decided to support the government tacked on all this additional extra spending in addition to the benefit that the NDP wanted. So in the Bill C4, there was three parts of it. On expenditures, but the third part was just discretionary spending of an additional, I believe, $19 billion without really any direct program or where that money was going. I liken that number, because you go back to the first Liberal budget when they were $20 billion in deficit, and everyone was like, whoa, you're spending so much money now. Now it's like 5 years later, just a little line item on a much bigger spending program. And that's very concerning for me, because $19 billion is still a lot of money.
So I follow you quite closely. I do a twice weekly news show, and every show I either show a video, because you put little video clips on your social media. I either play those or I read out the last tweet and or Facebook post that you do. So I follow you quite close.
Yeah.
You've been doing you've been very active in Parliament, at least, and in petitions, and there was I like the long one about housing, and
my speech.
That was awesome. Who wasn't wearing the tie?
Oh, that was a Bloc Québécois member, something Sainte-Marie. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, because I was looking towards the speaker and not the screen. Right. So I couldn't actually see the member by the time the video feed came up in the House of Commons who it was, because I'm trying to listen carefully to what he's saying in French and I'm looking for when I'm responding. So I didn't know, but I actually really wanted to answer his question. And I thought it was a good one. And it was about the proper role of the federal and provincial governments and what role they play in delivering healthcare. Now, one thing we've seen during COVID is we've noticed that some of our supports, the long-term care supports we provide for seniors, are not sufficient in British Columbia or any other part of Canada for that matter. And the question was about respecting the proper jurisdictions. Now, I believe that the federal government should probably step up and provide more for long-term seniors care. I think most MPs from Quebec just want to have that as a direct transfer to the province of Quebec and the other provinces of Canada. Right now, there's a broader discussion going on about whether or not it would be good for the federal government to set a national standard for seniors care in long-term facilities. So that was what the question was about. Yeah.
But so in the videos that I see on your Facebook page, you're covering things like abortion and housing. So can you speak a little bit as to the things that you're championing in those petitions in your riding?
Yeah. So I did do a petition on sex selective abortion that was put forward by the community, and sex selective abortion is a contentious topic. But basically, the crux of it is that we do not have abortion laws in Canada, and these people were asking for, and I agree with them, that we need to have some form of regulation in place to address sex selective abortion. That is, we're not conducting an abortion solely on the basis that we're making a decision because we don't want to have a boy or a girl in certain circumstances. I just don't think that's morally correct. And I think the large majority of Canadians would agree with me that having an abortion because you don't like the sex of your baby is wrong. And that's the basis of that petition. I made a statement in the House of Commons last week in support of corrections officers. In my riding, we had the largest outbreak in the entire country at a federal institution, and they're in contract negotiations right now, so they're also pushing for more strict health and safety protocol. I know your father's a corrections officer or a retired one.
Retired. He now,
just like my dad, he's a retired corrections officer too. So I was raising that in the House of Commons, and I just got approved another petition, mostly and we're picking up some more today here in Ashcroft on rural broadband internet, and I will be speaking on that issue next week in the House of Commons.
Oh, awesome. I'm going to actually ask you about that. Might as well ask you now. Is there anything? We've spoken about rural internet before in a previous video. Has there been any progress?
Well, there was an announcement in the speech from the throne on rural broadband internet. The Liberals have made other speeches before, but right now what our party's doing is we're putting a lot of pressure on the government to get that money out the door as quickly as possible so we can see some progress. And I hope to see some action in the very near future. But unfortunately, in terms of shovels in the ground, putting in the wires, it's not moving fast enough. But there is broad consensus in Parliament that this is critical for Canada's economy. It's critical for citizens to have this essential service. And everyone needs to pull up their bootstraps and get to work on this, and myself included, because it's really a big deal in Mission, Matsqui, Fraser Canyon.
Taylor has a question, but I'm just going to say, Taylor, we're going to get to that at closer towards the ends of the show. So keep commenting. I appreciate you tagging all these people. So that's awesome. Okay, so we do have a question from somebody in Ashcroft.
Yeah.
So let me just pull this up here. So recently, I don't know how much you've been following anything going on in town. Like I think that you might be up on a bigger picture thing. But one of the things going on is in regards to a thing called the Ashcroft Slough, which, if there wasn't a grass here, we would be able to see it out the window. So this question comes from a nice lady named Gloria. She says, CN Rail and ports, including inland ports, are a federal jurisdiction. The Government of Canada has given over $14 million in federal grants for the expansion of the Ashcroft Terminal, which owns the area known as the Ashcroft Slough. A large number of locals, former residents, and visitors want continued access to the Ashcroft Slough, riparian space unusable for industrial development, but which has deep cultural, historical, and recreational significance for these citizens. Are you prepared to advocate for the public to regain access to this wild riverine parkland?
Right. Okay. So, great question. I think first and foremost, with the expansion of the terminal, and that being the CN main line, we have to respect she's correct and point out that it is federal jurisdiction under the Railway Act. And the Railway Act has very strict protocol about accessing lands adjacent to or through those are railway lines. So for me, it's mostly a public safety question, and I want to see anything that takes place. The Railway Act and the regulations under Transport Canada need to be followed. Now, Ashcroft is set for a major expansion at that exact area. I'm actually going there today. It's on my list of things to do. But we need to make sure as a community that public safety is upheld, that federal jurisdiction is followed, and that would be my first and foremost priority. So I do understand, and I was made aware by many of the members on the through the community consultation process, and by the Ashcroft Terminal about 6 or 7 months ago already, that they were starting a process to review other areas where those recreation activities could take place through some investments by the Ashcroft Terminal to improve either boat access or trails through the area. And I think they're working towards a right balance, and I think the terminal did that in good faith, and I hope that we see some resolution on this issue.
For those of you at home, we do have several interviews on our YouTube channel, one from the Ashcroft Slough Society, one from the Ashcroft Terminal, and there's even one where I go on a walk to try and get to the slough illegally.
Okay, I should probably watch that.
It's interesting. But to continue on, just so I make sure I read everything that Gloria had sent in.
I'd have to question her number on $14 million, though. I believe there was an initial $9 million, three and a half. I think $14 million might have been committed, but I don't believe that was the actual number. I believe it's more about 12 and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
But she continues saying, don't such large phased-in development plans for ports have to have a parks or a green space component for the well-being of those impacted? And if not, why not? And do you want both of the last questions at the same time? Or?
Okay.
And then the railways are given prime lands that cut off river and lake access all across Canada. Massive multinationals are now the primary owners of huge tracts of Canadian land. Policy and laws need to be proposed and adopted to allow the public the freedom to roam. This has never been more evident than in this time of COVID, where green spaces have become the panacea for health and well-being. What policies and laws are you prepared to suggest, and how can we hold you to your word?
Well, I'm not necessarily ready to propose any laws or changes to the Railway Act as it relates to the Ashcroft Terminal right now. My priority is to ensure that we actually get this terminal built, because of it's significant for our country, and what it will do for jobs and our economic growth across Canada, and doing so in a sustainable way, because I believe that they're going to be building alternative fuel tanks up here too that are good for the environment. And I believe that the terminal is going to help Ashcroft grow into a more vibrant community, and I think that's a very good thing. So I don't know the answer to the first part of the question about whether there is for a terminal expansion, whether there is a component for park space involved. I think that might actually would fall to municipal levels of government to have proper OCPs in place to ensure that green space and the ability for citizens to access waterways was included in any of the initial agreements that took place. As it relates to federal jurisdiction, my first and foremost responsibility would be to uphold the current Railway Act and to ensure public safety, and that's where I stand on the issue. But I'd be pleased to speak with this individual offline to hear more about where she's coming from and hear any suggestions she has.
Awesome. One of the things that we talked about before, so last time we talked, you were in the midst of the possibility of a new Conservative leader.
Yeah.
And I forget who you had said that you were interested in voting for.
At the time, I might not have made a decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how are you sitting with Aaron O'Toole?
Well, I actually came out later in the spring, and I supported Aaron O'Toole as leader of the Conservative Party. So I'm very pleased he won, and I think we're taking a new approach under his leadership, and our big focus is to, and my role too, is to help people see themselves in the Conservative Party. So I'm trying to build trust with different segments of the population, doing lots of outreach where I can with COVID-19 restrictions, and really give the party a refresh for the 21st century. So you're going to be seeing us come out with a pretty bold environmental plan. You're going to see us, in my responsibilities, come out with a housing plan to respond to many of the challenges people face in urban and rural areas. And you're going to see us be responsive to the issues that matter most to British Columbians and Canadians. And I'm really enthused about the new tone he's setting and the professionalism he brings to this role.
So, the main populace of your riding is, of course, Mission, Matsqui, that sort of area. What things are you championing, I don't know why I can't say that word, right now for the Fraser Canyon?
Yeah, well, the big thing I believe right now is really raising awareness on broadband internet again. We were pushing those petitions pretty hard throughout the riding. That's number one. Secondly, like throughout the entire riding, my focus over the last, basically since March, has been on the recovery benefits and moving past COVID-19. In the other major issue I'm facing that I'm dealing with in the Fraser Canyon and advocating on relates to staffing levels with our RCMP detachments. That's mostly in Lillooet, but they do not have adequate staffing right now per their contract with the provincial government. So I've been pushing really, really hard to ensure that there's adequate level of staffing at our RCMP detachments. That's been taking a significant amount of my time in the Fraser Canyon.
You've recently become Shadow Minister for Housing.
Yeah.
How is, for our viewers, what is a Shadow Minister? Mm-hmm. And B, what are you doing?
Yeah, so Shadow Minister, we adopted that term about 5 years ago. It's used in Britain, same style of democracy that we have, the Westminster style of democracy, and it demonstrates to Canadians that we are government in waiting. So right now, in my role as Housing Shadow Minister, I am developing policies to bring forward to Canadians in advance of the next election to give them alternatives to what the current government is doing and to provide them with a different option and different take on how public funds are used, both for supportive housing, how it's used to deal with the drug crisis and opioid crisis across the province, and what we can do to address affordability and home ownership concerns, and money laundering and speculation in the market.
Wow, that's pretty broad.
It's very, very broad. It's top of mind issue for many people, and so I'm really diving into my research right now and really trying to develop some great policies that will address those key concerns for Canada.
Do you have any tidbits, things that you can throw at us now, the things that you're working on?
Yeah, so I'm very focused on addressing the role of foreign buyers. So there has been, like not too far from here in Kelowna, you've seen a massive increase in real estate costs, and especially in the Fraser Valley, where the majority of the population in Mitch and Matsqui Fraser Canyon lives. So we need to look at what role foreign buyers should play in our market, how we're ensuring that Canadians get the first go at new housing builds, looking at making our adjustments to CRA reporting requirements for foreign buyers to make sure that everyone's on a level playing field, and that Canadians have faith in our institutions to prevent money laundering, and to have faith that the system is working in their best interests. And unfortunately, in British Columbia, over the last decades, we've seen a diminution in the faith people have in our institutions to curtail things like money laundering. So I'm really spending a lot of time on that, and seeking a lot of expert advice to get this policy right.
How does one launder money?
Well, they have the provincial Cohen Commission on that right now. So it's a big question that a lot of people are asking. Not the Cohen Commission, I got that wrong. That's the salmon one. That's another issue. But they have a provincial commission right now that's been suspended for the duration of the election to address that very key point. Peter German, who did some of the initial reporting, longtime RCMP officer, outlined some of the methods that are taking place through blind trusts and unregulated mortgages that account for up to 10% of our mortgage purchases in British Columbia. So there's a multitude of ways people launder money, but I think that's the billion-dollar question right there. So,
is that a laundered $1 billion, or is that a...
Yeah, I said in the House of Commons that I attended in January an all-party briefing put on by CRA in Vancouver, and there they outlined that their risk-based auditing process is pretty stringent in Canada. There's been additional funds put into it, and they're having a lot of success finding people after the fact and then starting this long process. My position is that we need to address compliance and enforcement at the front end to prevent getting laundered money into our real estate sector at the onset. And so just learning from experts and taking their advice on how best to do that through effective reporting requirements first and foremost.
Again, last time we spoke, you had talked about the salmon and steelhead
Yeah.
in the area,
Yeah.
and you had just briefly touched on it there. So why don't we talk about that? Has there been any progress?
Well, there wasn't any progress. We were all awaiting the Cohen Commission on the Discovery Islands and the impact that has on the Fraser watershed. Unfortunately, DFO decided to not recommend shutting down some of the fish farms. I'm of the opinion that we need to take a much more stringent approach to dealing with our current regulations to prevent the loss of the remaining salmon. I think related to, well, I guess there was some progress actually, because we got the big bar infrastructure was put in place, and they've seen some successes seeing the fish go further into the interior of British Columbia through those initial investments, and I think everyone was happy to see that take place. So that was progress. There has been no progress on steelhead. I've pushed for some clarification as to why steelhead were not outlined as a species at risk by DFO or Environment Canada. I still haven't gotten a straight answer, so that's an ongoing concern of mine. But generally speaking, I think there's broad consensus again by Canadians, not necessarily by government officials, that we need to radically change the way we're dealing with our salmon in British Columbia to protect this iconic species. And we're not doing nearly enough on conservation and repopulation where we could be right now to support our wild fish.
I'm going to go back to Taylor's question now. So I haven't read this yet, so I'm not sure what this question is. Is there any programs for people like myself which can apply for concerning exchange students? As you are aware, we aren't paid according to economy, and it's under $20,000 per year. We also are considered self-employed, yet it's such a low amount annually that host parents don't claim it. Where do we apply?
Is there a program for, just to clarify, a program for families that host foreign students in their homes?
Is there programs for people like myself which can apply for concerning exchange students? As you're aware, we aren't paid according to economy, and it's under 20,000 per year. We're also considered self-employed. It doesn't.
Yeah, I
Taylor
think
doesn't specify.
if you're self-employed, you might qualify for some of the other benefits, not specifically for host families, but if you have a small business account, you could apply for the Canada Emergency Business Account Loan. And some of the other subsidies that were available, like, well, even for the Canada Recovery benefit, if you've seen that drop in your income and you're not generating the normal income that you reported on your previous taxation filings. So if Taylor would like to call my office and speak to Sukhpreet or Brittany, I think they would be able to give a better answer than I'm able to do once we got some of the specific details related to Taylor's small business account.
Okay. And Taylor says we don't qualify for EI.
Exactly, and that's why the Canada Recovery benefit might be the one they qualify for, because that was specifically put in place and it only opened on October 12th for people that don't qualify for EI but have seen a drop in their income due to COVID-19.
Gotcha.
In this case, if Taylor has lost his revenue stream because foreign students aren't coming into Canada, it seems to me he might likely be eligible for the Canada Recovery benefit. And that is $2,000 a month for the next 26 months, similar to what we had in the previous program.
Taylor says fantastic, and thank you. So, what else we got? The change from the CERB to the EI.
Yes.
Is that a good change in your opinion? Should CERB kept on going, or is this an appropriate response to times need to change?
I think the change to the employment insurance was appropriate. It was appropriate for that to take place because built into our employment insurance are levels of accountability. So to ensure that people are seeking a job, seeking work, that when a job is available, and they're not impacted by COVID, that they can take that job. So it provides all people in the program a level of accountability that will improve labor market participation in the long run. So I'm glad we moved back to employment insurance.
Good. This one isn't such a joke as my first question was, but again, you're part of Parliament.
Yeah.
So are we? Going back to COVID-19, are we any closer to a vaccine in Canada? Is there anything that you've heard with being with the higher ups?
Yeah, well, I get the same information in question period as a lot of Canadians do. In that I do not know the progress of where we're at on the vaccine right now. I think as I mentioned earlier in our interview, rapid testing is one of the key ways that we can see more people return to work and where we can see all Canadians return to a level of normalcy. Once we can provide those assurances, kids aren't going to be withheld from going to school anymore, and parents can go back to their jobs because they're not at home taking care of their kids. That's where we really need to focus. But I could get back to you on a specific update about where we're at on a vaccine, but I don't have that specific information in front of me right now.
No, that's fair. I haven't read it yet. I haven't seen this. But last night I was at both council meetings, one in Ashcroft, one in Cache Creek, and they had both mentioned a letter that you had sent to the councils recently.
Okay.
Early October, maybe.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm wondering if you remember that letter. What was the letter about? Because they didn't really talk about it. Yeah. But they brought it up.
Oh well, I'm just working on getting a handle on. I don't know the specific letter you're referring to because I've written many letters to both Ashcroft and Cache Creek councils. But generally, I'm always seeking clarification on the priorities of all of the communities in the riding and where I can best advocate on their behalf. And I'm working on certain economic development projects as well that are ongoing. So that's likely what the correspondence they were referring to. But the letters I would have sent to both Ashcroft and Cache Creek would be different. But I would have to read the meeting notes from the council agendas to give you a better idea about what they were talking about.
And I apologize. That was just something that popped into my head last night. There, everybody was talking about you, and I was like, "What are they talking?" Because normally I get the letters too.
Yeah.
Or I get some of the letters, I should
Yeah.
say. And so I felt kind of left out.
Yeah,
But
well, this is the thing, like, Mission Matsqui Fraser Canyon, and we've talked about this before, it's such a large riding. Since day one, I'm really focusing my constituency team on being responsive to every community. And so we do a lot of correspondence because we want to uplift every community, and we want to help everyone and every community reach their full potential and see the vision that local officials have for their regions. And I just want to help elevate that as their federal MP. So yeah, I am pretty active, and yeah, I do send a lot of letters, but I think it's for the well-being of the people I represent.
so we're coming up to the 11 o'clock time where you got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to talk about? Things that you have coming up, Parliament has coming up?
Yeah, well, I'm working on an Opposition Day motion. It hasn't been approved yet, but I'm really hoping to do a full debate in Parliament on the housing issues that we face in our country in my new role as Shadow Minister. So I'm pushing to have that approved. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we get that sometime before Christmas. But most importantly, I come on live internet with you because my job number one is to be accountable to the people of Mission Matsqui Fraser Canyon. I got Allison over here. Allison, why don't you just come online for 2 seconds and just give a quick wave. But I have Allison works in my office as my basically my Fraser Canyon liaison. And just give a wave. Allison's in town in the north, in Ashcroft and Lillooet and Cache Creek. Thanks, Allison. Every 3 weeks or so. This week she's in here. She's up in the canyon almost every week. It's because there needs to be more of a federal presence here, and so I'm putting in a lot of manpower into making sure that we're hearing from people here. Because although the populations might be smaller, the development of the communities, the land-based issues that we talked about earlier with the Ashcroft Terminal, that takes a lot of work on my office's part, and I want to be able to do that work. So we're really trying to be here and be present as much as possible. I'm in the canyon at least once a month, and really love being here. I remember last time I was in town, and when we were driving in, I'm just like, every time I'm in Ashcroft, oh, it's so beautiful. And now I'm like, oh, the Sedona, British Columbia, as the artists across the way here at the hub say. And I think that's a great model to emulate, and to see that arts and the wellness industries that people want to bring here thrive. But I'm rambling a bit, but all I can say is that job number one, be accountable. Don't be afraid to take the tough questions. Make sure that I'm available and present in all parts of the riding, because that by doing so, I can hear from people, and I can see firsthand and bring that to Ottawa on your behalf. And that's why I'm doing a lot of it on rural internet and rural broadband internet, because that's what I hear from people, and I want to make sure their voice is heard, and I want to see progress, and I'm going to keep using the voice that I have to see that happen.
Could you give just say your email address for people?
Yeah, so my parliamentary email address is brad.vis, Vis, at parl, P-A-R-L, .gc.ca. And Allison's email address is allison.rochelle.817 at parl.gc.ca. And Gareth, you can maybe put that into the video later.
Yeah, I'll add it into the description.
Yeah, and Allison is my go-to person here, and she is in all of the communities in the Fraser Canyon on a regular basis, hearing from people, dropping off petitions, just giving me a lay of the land. So when I'm in Ottawa or I'm not able to travel, I still know what's going on.
Awesome.
Any final questions, Gareth?
I think I'm good. I just appreciate the fact that you're willing to come into a small town newsroom.
Yeah,
And,
you know what? You put me on the hot seat, and it's good. So I'll just say one more thing again. Support your local Legion. Get a membership. Go online. Buy a Legion face mask. I think they're pretty cool. And let's think of our veterans, especially our senior veterans. I know there's some in Ashcroft and Cache Creek that need our support right now. So Poppy Fund's going to be a little different this year. Let's all just play our small part and make sure that the revenues that are normally collected are still there if you're so able to donate and support this year. I really appreciate the time today, and thank you, sir.
And everybody at home, if you'd like to follow Brad, he has a Twitter account, a Facebook account, and we talk about him twice a week on our news show, so be sure to check that out on Tuesdays and Fridays. And other than that, we'll see you all next time.